And I think we're live with the third part of the epic Typing Jeff video, which somebody else can type up. It's not going to be me, and it probably won't be Jeff. But eventually, go on then.
What I realized that was missing from the first two videos that we did yesterday was music. You know, I'd have a little intro music. You know, so.
But it's going to get taken off.
Oh, come on, not for 5 seconds of that, probably.
Oh no! Should I start again?
No.
I think that was so generic that even Google shouldn't be able to recognize that music.
Yeah, it probably won't be.
And Jeff has convinced me to break up my videos. So more evidence for INTP over INTJ. Flexibility. Right. Oh God, we're live. Okay, this is about Jeff and his strengths.
Spontaneity, you know, like spontaneous dancing. I actually did. I guess you could say I planned that today. I had that queued up, but like that, I only thought of it like 5 minutes ago. I was like, I should dance to something, and then I just was like, well, it's kind of good generic dance music, and I thought of that particular song, which was a hit in the UK and not in America. So it was that was like a shout out to you, Ben. You know.
Right. Hopefully Google doesn't recognize it.
The only one that I've ever had, like I've seen videos that use all kinds of common music and don't have any problems. The only one that's ever done anything on me was one U2 song. And that same video had other music in it, and none of the other songs that were in there on the radio,
right.
Nothing was said about. But U2, they're like, I don't want to call them Nazis because that's like people use that word too much, and I don't want to make that connotation. But like, they're one of those bands that like their lawyers are like on it if somebody uses their music. Metallica, same deal. They're like, they were the ones that went after Napster and all that. So Anyway, so what do you want to know?
Your strengths, Jeff. Your strengths.
Rambling about nothing. Spilling stuff. That's like that's what I'm best at, is spilling stuff. My dynamic magnetism. That's another strength.
I wonder if this is your first video where you've appeared with glasses on.
I'm pretty sure it's not.
Okay, it's not a first then.
No,
okay.
I don't think so.
Don't
think so.
I would say your strengths.
I don't think it's really a secret that I'm blind. I think most people know that. They just don't know. If they see me without the glasses, I'm usually wearing contacts.
Right. Okay.
Well, if I'm not, then I just don't care if I can see anything. Because I'm pretty blind.
I would say one of Jeff's strengths is, and something that is mentioned off air, that I think people should know a bit more about Jeff, and that is Jeff's generosity. If you like, because you were telling us about the impulsive giving, being a great guy in that area.
Well, I mean, I enjoy giving to people. Yeah. I guess the strength in it is that it is less in the giving itself, is that I don't expect anything in return from people, whereas some people, they kind of have. I remember way back in one of his early videos, Mike with NF Geeks, when he was still doing the videos with Dave, they talked about SJs keeping a logbook of like, who I've given to and who owes me what, I don't do that kind of thing. Like I like taking people out. I like doing things for people. It's just, just part of my natural kind of enjoyment. So I mean, the way I look at it, it's like it's fun for me. So it's not entirely a selfless act. But then what is? I don't know. Yeah, but
You've you said that you sponsor 2 children in Africa. Is that right?
one of them's in Africa and the other is in Indonesia, maybe somewhere around Southeast Asia. Yeah, yeah. That was a funny story because the one in Kenya, his name is Rufus, and I picked him because I wanted to. Had this idea, once again, continuing the theme of ideas I have that never quite come to fruition. But I picked him because he's only 4 days older than Morgan is, my son. So I had this idea. Oh, they can write letters to each other, and it'd be like this cool pen pal thing across the world. And of course, he never really Morgan really never showed any interest in writing to him, so that never happened. But that like when he sends me letters from Kenya, I can kind of compare what he says his life is like to Morgan. So there's a little bit of that, even though that I'm asked not to, when I write letters to him, discuss anything that's like about you know here that they don't have, stuff like that. We're not supposed to really talk about things like that, and so I don't. But we do talk about things like we talked about like what sports he played and things like that. So there's some things you can talk about without really getting into the something where you're going to make somebody feel bad for what they don't have. I don't think it probably would anyway, but they don't want it to happen, so say not to. And then so I picked Rovers for that reason. So he's already 16. So I've been sponsoring him for, gosh, at least 8 years, maybe more than that. I can't remember how old he was when I first started that. And the second one I added just a couple years ago, and they would write things to me from time to time to sponsor another child, and so I got to a point financially where I felt like I could afford it. So then it was a matter of, okay, well, how do I pick the second one? Do I just tell them who needs it the most or whatever? But they have a thing on the website where they actually have pictures of the kids. And so I was just kind of skimming through it, thinking, okay, well, I'm gonna pick somebody, whatever. But then I came across this picture of this girl whose name was Mercy, and her picture, she kind of had her hand on her hip and had this look on her face, like, you better pick me. And I was like, okay, that's my kid right there.
Yeah.
I was like, it's fate or whatever that I came across.
Do you think she could be? Do you think it's likely she could be of the artisan temperament?
It could be. I don't know. Obviously, she's not old enough yet to really write very well. Her letters are very short and and simple. So I don't know a whole lot about her yet. But yeah, that's through an organization called Compassion International. So if anybody watching this wants to look that up and look into that, then by all means, it's a very reputable organization. They've been around for a long time and have reports you can look at and all that stuff. If you had any qualms about giving to them,
It'd be a very good Google Hangout in future. That would be a great Google Hangout in future. You meeting the children that you sponsor in a hangout. Wow. Anyhow, don't want to get too emotional about that. Have you frozen up?
Every once in a while they send something about a trip over there, but it's always like way more money than I could possibly afford. So I don't know when I'll be able to do that. I'm gonna have to gonna have to come into some money in some way to do that. But that would be fun.
You mentioned something about something out there about being an anonymous angel, in terms of where there's like
of an angel.
a fund where there's a target to raise a certain amount of money for something.
Oh yeah. Every once in a while, there's stuff like on Facebook or whatever where somebody's raising money for a particular thing, and some of those. I like to be the one that comes in and hits the if it's like they're trying to raise $500 and they've raised $300 so far, and everybody's been giving like $10 or $20 each, and then I'll just give $200 to finish it off. That's another thing that I was able to do for a while there when my money situation was different. But now I have some expenses I didn't have before, like monthly insurance for that is higher, and some others. So, and my rent has gone up, and haven't gotten a raise at work in a couple of years. So,
Right.
So it's a little tougher for me to do that sort of thing now, but I try to do what I can.
So for all the left wingers out there, a stronger economy means people can be more generous.
Political pen.
But it's true though in your case.
Want to have everybody on board.
Yeah. Yep. Left wingers give to charity too, so they can accept that.
Well, yeah. Ben's fond of making things into like right wing things. Personally, I think there's too much of that in society where everybody acts like, oh, you're from this place, or you feel this way about one particular thing. Oh, you must be one of those left wingers or right wingers, whatever. I get annoyed with that kind of stuff.
Even then, though, even like in the most
blue state stuff.
Even then, it's like 60-40. It's like a whole load of people that aren't the color of the state. It's not like it's 99.
Right. I'm saying is that when I go to when I bring my car into mechanic, I'm not worried about whether the mechanic is a liberal. I just, in general, like, we can have different views on stuff and still get along in society and not view everything as us versus them. That's kind of one of my pet peeves, is people acting like that. Which goes back to what I was talking about in one of the previous hangouts we did yesterday. Not being a fan of putting people out. Like I said, I was sort of doing that kind of naturally. But even so, I can't ignore patterns and similarities I see in people, but that still does not take away from that person's individuality. That's number one for me, is like every person I encounter, I would forget themselves, then I would find out enough about them to put them in a group and then start attaching things from that group onto them. I think too many people do, and I don't like that.
So would you say another one of your strengths is
open-mindedness?
Open?
Yes, I would.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, I used my intuition that time. I knew what he was going to say. That was just a lucky guess. But yes, yeah. I say this without really trying to boast in any way. I think I'm one of the most open-minded people that I've ever met, and that, again, that really isn't me trying to boost myself. It's just me being honest. Like, as I encounter people in my life, there are very few people I've met that I feel like really do take everyone at face value and let them be themselves in terms of how I interact with them. I don't jump to all these conclusions about someone when I meet them based on what they look like or where they're from, or yeah, there are things people can say and do that will activate prejudices within me. I think that's a natural human thing. You can't get rid of that entirely. There's going to be things that you hear or see that are going to change your perception of somebody. There's been all kinds of little social experiments about that. People that you could take the exact same person and have them dressed in like baggy clothes and hat backwards and stuff like that, or put this exact same person in a suit, and you're going to have a different perception from people as to what that
Oh
person
yeah.
is like, things like that. So there are things that I can't entirely, get rid of, and there's probably no need to. But in terms of the open mindedness of it, it's like I am willing to listen to just about anybody about whatever. And even if I have listened to a person and they've shown me that there's a particular area where I think they might be a little nutso about whatever it is, that doesn't mean that I can't take that person's input on something else. It could be that they've got valuable things to say on a number of topics, and it just happens to be one thing that we're like way apart on. And so I don't like to just write off people that way. And that's why I don't call people and refer to people as good and bad people, because I look at it as people are people. There are good and bad actions, but there's nobody that's like unredeemable or uncorruptible. Um,
Oh,
I
oh,
don't trust anyone to be some kind of perfect person who always does right, and I don't think someone, just because they've done a lot of wrong, automatically can't change directions.
but
So you
maybe
have you
it's
have the power to make the next moment and make the choice in the next moment, regardless of what you've done in the past.
maybe in terms of good and bad people, it might just be that you have a higher bar for someone to then go into the next. So, for instance, say someone who is really bad, where say if they're a rapist or aggravated rape, and would you say that's good or bad actions, or is it just that your bar is
Yeah,
higher
that's
in order to
that's
put somebody in that category?
those are really bad actions, but I still do not say that makes someone a bad person. If you label somebody that, then there's only two possibilities. If someone is a person, that's a possibly change. They're just a bad person for life. Or two, if they were to change their life, they would become a good person. They were a former bad person. Happened. And do another crime. Do they go back to becoming a bad person? Like, did they switch back? Or is that just a series of actions that can be judged on their own merits? And
But
that's the way, reason I don't label people that way, is because just by nature of that, there's only two possibilities. So once you've called someone a
but
bad or a good person, either that's a permanent thing, or it's a thing that changes and then changes back if they change again.
oh, they'd have to do a lot to redeem themselves. In terms of though, but you do believe in or recognize categorizing people by temperament.
Yeah, because there are patterns of behavior that are values neutral. Saying that you recognize someone shows the pattern of a guardian or an idealist or whatever. You're not then making a judgment about that person's value, because all temperaments have value. They all provide what they provide. They're all needed for society and the world to function as it does. So me saying I can recognize this in this person, does not is not me putting them in a box of behavior, like they have to do these certain things or they have to fit this exact uh, category. It's more like, here is a label simply based on what it is that you value. The values and orientations, as Kersey put it, that you show. That's what that is. It's not a value judgment. So, and in
Do
fact, even in the books, Kersey pointed out that it's probably a good thing that half of the people basically are guardians, because they kind of do all of the little things that sort of hold society together that a lot of people take for granted. You know, so uh, just because I have concluded somebody fits that does not mean I'm in any way dismissing them as being like interesting or boring people or some whatever. There's plenty of guardians that are interesting people, that are friendly people, that are people that provide a lot of useful things for society and are fun to be around and all that kind of good stuff. That's true of all temperaments. So, and I'm saying not much years ago, I wouldn't have been able to say that. But I would have rejected, the labeling entirely by saying, I don't believe in any of these groups. I think that that I can accept certain categorizations like that without robbing people of their individuality or their, valuable contributions, whatever they may be.
Do you think you are uh, uh, do you forgive people, or is it a case that you see it as uh, what they've done? It,
Yes, I do forgive people. Next question.
no, what I mean is, it's like it might be a case of somebody sees somebody as doing something wrong and they forgive them, whereas you might be a case of people that other people would consider that something is that people have done wrong, but you don't see that as wrong. You interpret that as, so it's like you're not sort of like condemning someone's behavior internally and then actively forgiving them. It's that you're not actually making that judgment on people in the first place. For then,
Well, I can certainly. I mean, I certainly judge plenty of things people do as wrong, but I think, uh, is my obviously my values are going to be what they are, and they're not going to be the same entirely as anybody else's. So, I mean, yes, it's happened plenty of times that somebody else is offended by a person's behavior and I'm not. But the opposite can happen too. There's times I'm bothered by something where nobody else seems to be bothered by it. So, um, you know, uh,
so,
I think forgiveness is more about somebody hurting me, um,
yeah,
than it is more of like. I mean, people talk about like when you talk about judging people's actions is wrong. People spend time talking about like celebrities and stuff like that, and doing things, or they commit crimes, or they, you know, go end up in drug rehab or whatever this stuff. Like I have no need to forgive those people. That's none of my business. Like
yeah.
that's that's not part of my life. Just because those people are in the public eye doesn't mean somehow I've been granted the right of forgiveness for them. You know, if I like a particular entertainer, I enjoy watching them entertain. That doesn't give me any kind of claim of ownership on them to expect certain behaviors. So they don't owe me anything, and I don't have to forgive them for anything. If I say I don't care about autographs really. I know some people do, but say that I did want to go to some star that I liked and asked for their autograph, and they threw my pen and just ran off, and they were rude about it or whatever and didn't give me. Yeah, I mean that would be a thing I could say I could forgive somebody for because it's an actual direct action to me. But somebody who's completely detached from me doing something that has nothing to do with me, I'm not really in the place to forgive that anyway.
In Victor's system, you would have the FI plus thing there. So forgiving people, giving them the benefit of the doubt, grieving and comforting those struck by grief, being kind to others. Does that sort of like your ethos as well?
Yeah, so that's like FI plus is where that you have to turn the battery so that uh,
Yeah.
the minus is on that end like this. So that's
Yeah.
is that with the end that sticks out, or is that the round end?
Well, if we're going to go into the science of it, actually they got it wrong because they actually found out that the electrons go the other way around. So really, it's that one should have been plus and the other one should have been minus.
Wow,
So they actually.
I think that's breaking news in the middle of our video, Ben. So yeah, giving benefit of the doubt is a very good term. Yes, I do that a lot. I don't and there are people that are just straight up the opposite of that. They look for reasons to have a problem with someone, and I've never understood that. I now understand that there are people that they do that, and that's their natural instinct, and I have to accept that, but I don't understand it. To me, there's enough things that happen in life just naturally that there's going to be things that come up that bother you. That why would you go look for something to be bothered by? Why are you going to? And I guess some people think they're doing like a public service when they do that. They think it's, they have that attitude of, if I don't do this, nobody else will, and I'm being vigilant and pointing out things that people need to, be aware of. I guess that's what it's about. Um, but it's definitely very different than me. I don't go looking for things to criticize about people or things to have a problem with. I try to find
Right.
the positives and try to let people show me the positives of whatever it is that they can present to me, because I try to do the same thing myself. I try to present to people what I can that's positive. I don't Doesn't mean I never complain about anything. Of course I do, and I can have my rants on stuff when I'm upset or stressed or not feeling good about whatever, but I don't look for those things. Those things just happen. Like those in the course of life, you're going to encounter stuff that stresses you, causes you grief and irritation. So I don't have any reason to look for that. I don't seek it.
I would say one of your strengths is, and you talked a little bit about this in off-air hangouts as well, is I think one of your strengths is that you will stick up for people.
Yeah, that can be a strength or a weakness depending on the circumstance. But yeah, I've always been that way. And again, it's just a very instinctive thing with me, not something where I've got some kind of strategy to be the world's defender in any way. It's just when someone is being ganged up on, or the thing at most is when someone's attacked by a group in some way, I feel the need to come to their defense. But it really, a lot of it stems from that same place, that just the rebelliousness and the contrarian nature. It's because it doesn't even have to necessarily be that a person is being ganged up on. Sometimes it can just be an idea. Sometimes you can have like 6 or 7 people are all saying the same thing, and my instinct is to point out a dissenting view in some way. That's just my instinct, is to find the thing they're missing and point that out. So I sort of have a natural way of seeing different sides to things, and I don't think that's like, if it was in the NF idealist kind of way, it would be more about, oh, I see these other sides so we can bring people together and make, find this cooperation. For me, it's actually more of the opposite instinct. I have sometimes caused conflict by expressing that dissent. It has not been something to reconcile or mediate for people. It's been something that stirred things up. So it's it's a different, comes from a different place.
Right. In my opinion, you're very observant about people.
Yeah.
Would you say that's fair?
Yes, I would. I think, and this is why I've said, when it comes to when people try to do typings of, famous people or whoever, even not so famous people, I feel like in general, sensing types are probably better at the parts of typing that require observation, in terms of through the senses. That's just sort of, since we're better in general at that, we're going to be better at doing that when it comes to applying it to people's types. And I think when it comes to intuitives, that there are elements of type that are easier for intuitives to do. And so the more that you know a person, intimately, in terms of knowing really a lot about what makes them tick and what they're motivated by and all that kind of stuff, I think the more valuable the intuitive contribution becomes, because they can maybe pick up on some of those things that are elements that are maybe hidden in someone that aren't as obvious on the surface. I think that there was a time, again, where I probably wouldn't have recognized that. Really, I would have said that didn't really exist. But I have learned that it is there, and I've said that I think that the extroversion introversion part is something that I think intuitives are usually better at recognizing, because if you just leave it to be that kind of social stereotype thing of outgoing or versus shy, then anybody can see that. But I think when you get to the true preference for whether somebody truly prefers getting their energy alone or with people, I think intuitives are in general better at picking that up because it's more of the atmosphere or the vibe they get from someone than it is observing physical stuff as much. You can start to see physical stuff in some cases, but there's not as much. Whereas I think some of the other elements of type um, are better observed by sensing types, and one of them is sensing versus intuition itself, which seems to be something that sensors basically they can often tell when somebody is an intuitive type because they are a little bit different in that way. You know, they they ask more what if questions. They take uh, objects and turn them into subjects. They just have that thing where they stand out in some ways, being a little bit different. And I think
Ah,
people recognize that. And there's lots of different terms people will use for that. Some of them not so friendly, but I think if you're aware of typology, then you can, and you're a sensing type, you can kind of say, okay, in this room of 10 people, this guy stands out as being likely an intuitive type. And I think the temperament stuff helps with that also because you start to see those kind of patterns that tend to occur with idealists and rationals, where you see those, you might even recognize those things before you even say a particular person as an intuitive. You learn that by saying, okay, they really are seeming to reflect the values of an idealist, and then you say, okay, well then I see these other patterns that show me the same thing.
right, I'm just making some notes. You said objects into subjects. What do you mean by that?
Well, I didn't invent that, but the what I've said, that intuitives are more in general more interested in subjects and sensors and objects, and intuitives will take a conversation about objects and try to turn it to subjects. So they'll say somebody is listing what they did that day. They're like, I woke up, I ate breakfast, I took the train to work, and intuitive people are automatically hearing that. And if they're not just tuning out entirely, if they're listening, then they're thinking about what is brought up by that, like those actions. Like they're thinking about what are the things that entails, that trip to work in the morning or whatever. And they'll often talk about something related to that, either okay, crime on the train, or um, smog and pollution from vehicles or whatever. Like they'll bring up kind of these other ideas about it, or things that they want to improve in some way about that. Whereas the sensors will tend to stick to the facts of what occurred. I mean, they might complain about particular things, but then it still goes back to the object. Oh, I was sitting next to this person on the train, and they smelled bad. So it's like, again, it's a observation of the senses. And so the same thing happens in reverse if you have a majority of intuitive types in the conversation, and it starts to become more and more detached from talking about real world examples. The sensing types will tend to start giving starting to apply it to reality and start bringing it back to kind of ground it, as naturally that's what they're more comfortable with. So again, it's a values neutral thing. Neither way is the right or wrong way. It's just how people are naturally. And there's a reason probably why there's both. That there's, and again, it's not a people try to again, it's another thing people used to bash Kersey because they try to say, oh, he's saying that intuitive types are incapable of using their senses, and sensing types are incapable of any kind of deep or abstract thought. No, that's not what he said. That's not what I'm
No, it's
saying.
not.
That's not what anybody who is reasonable about observing these things can tell you. It's about preferences and natural instincts. It's not abilities. It's not that you can't learn how to do something, or that you. It's just that the things that are less natural to you are going to take more effort. That's just reality. And it's not a value judgment in saying, if you're a sensing type You're going to be less likely to spend time thinking about, fantastical situations that can't realistically occur. You're just less likely to do that, and unless you're on drugs. But in general, without any kind of interference, that's not going to be as much your natural instinct. It's not, again, I don't believe you're incapable of that entirely. And I've even talked about how people, when they get really fatigued, tend to sort of go the other direction somewhat, because it's like the part of their brain that is their normal, alert, awake self kind of starts to drop off a bit, and you have the other side kind of awaken. But it's never going to be completely that way, uh, just like the other way won't be completely that way. Hopefully that made some sense.
When it comes to first and considering their feelings,
Sorry,
is that
Mike went out a bit. Considering what first?
putting people first and considering their feelings?
Okay.
Is there is it like that? Is that very much situational and I get the impression that because it's the artisan temperament, it's not going to be all the while, and at a certain point, that might override things. Like if the putting other people first and considering their feelings gets in the way of what you want to do, then your own freedom will take precedence over that. Is that the right way of putting it? So what are like the limits of it? Because you are a generous and kind person. But...
So here we have an example right after what I was talking about of something where, yes, it is very situational, and I have a hard time answering that question unless you give me more specific examples of a situation. If you don't, then I'm kind of like, I don't know how to measure that. I mean, I'd like to think that I consider people's feelings all the time, but I know that there are probably times where whatever it is that has happened to me, or the particular frame of mind I'm in, means that I'm going to be less aware than I would be. I know there are times where that's the case, but I can't say like any kind of percentage or exactly how often that happens. I don't know. I think probably maturity plays into that. I'm probably better at that now than I was when I was younger. But I'm also probably more cynical, just over time. So there were things when I was younger that I might have gotten more fired up about because somehow I felt like there was some way to do something about it. And now I don't think that as much. So I might not actually outwardly react to like someone's feelings or whatever as much as I would have in the past, but it doesn't mean that I'm less considerate. It just means I'm less idealistic.
The way I would conceive the ESFP is that they would use FE. They would like all the people's, but then there would be a certain point because they're introverted feelers where it's like someone crosses the line, and then you still have to stay true to yourself, and that's like the ultimate thing. And then so you will put other people first, but only to a point. It's not like with other types. Maybe those types that have extroverted feeling further up their stack, they might be a bit more. They might be putting other people first too much to the detriment of themselves.
Yeah,
that sort of thing.
I mean, I think that I'm not ashamed in any way to say that in general I am self-centered. I don't think that is inherently a bad thing. I think when you use that as a reason to mistreat other people, or take away their value and things like that, then it becomes a problem. But just having a orientation of self-centeredness, if you want to call it that, I don't think that's inherently a problem. And I think in recognizing that is actually sort of a sign of maturity, that you don't have a delusion that there's somehow this 100% altruistic point that you can get to, that you're automatically always considering others before yourself. I think that's probably physically impossible, though there are some people who do it more than others, probably.
Right. So this is last year I did this sort of like the positive and negative of FI to sort of like try to make it clear to people what it looks like at its best and worst. So it's like to try to be
So
fair
at its best, it's purple, and at its worst, it's kind of a weird green color.
maybe. But in terms of like what you
Actually, at
said
its
there,
worst, it's crossed out because when you're crossed out, then you can't.
yeah. But what you were saying there about, so this goes to the issue of being self-centered is not necessarily a bad thing, because it means, like I said, on the positive side, you've got gut feeling, conscience, and sensitivity. I mean, would you think that those three things are important to you? I think.
I guess, yeah.
I mean, I think you once said that every decision you make is with a gut feeling.
Pretty much. Yeah. I mean, I don't know any other way that a decision can be really, because I mean, you can have like lists of pros and cons or whatever kind of data you want, um, but ultimately, you still have to make up your mind with your feeling about it. You have to have a gut feeling that going by these lists is the right thing to do. So no matter what method you have to come up with reasons for a decision, ultimately you have to have that gut feeling about it. Otherwise, you don't do it. I mean, to me, that's as simple as it gets. It's like what I said
Right.
about everybody has faith in something. Like if you literally have faith in nothing, then you're not going to get up in the morning. You're not going to do it for no reason to. If you don't have faith in something, even if it's just that gravity is going to continue to exist, and you can walk on the ground, and you're not going to be, fly off in the sky if you go outside. Things like that. But the same thing with gut feelings. I mean, not everybody acts spontaneously on gut feelings. That's a difference where some people they use the gut feeling to make a much lengthier, a more considered decision about something. But like I said, ultimately you still have to have a feeling that this is the right way to do it. Otherwise, you wouldn't do it that way.
How do you? What is conscience like? Sort of like the related concept of guilt. But what is conscience like for you compared to how you've seen other people describe it?
I don't have like any kind of feelings of guilt or like my conscience is telling me I did bad things or something. I've never experienced that. I've experienced anxiety uh, for being caught doing something that I wasn't supposed to be doing, by according to somebody. And I have had fear. Sure, I've had feelings of anxiety based on fear, either of like physical threats or um, financial threats, things where I thought I was going to not have enough money or, other stuff like that. I've had anxiety caused by that. Um, I have felt bad when I feel like I said something or did something that hurt someone's feelings, but it
Right.
wasn't a feeling of like, it wasn't some kind of being eaten up inside by something. It was just I felt sympathy towards the person and felt like anger at myself sometimes. If some anywhere from irritation to like severe anger at myself for doing something that hurt somebody else when that wasn't my intention. You know, and even if it was, there are times in which I've lashed out at someone where in that moment my intention probably was to hurt the person, but it was with a purpose even in that, because if I do that, it's usually because I feel somebody's attacking me, and so it's defending myself in a way where I hope that the impact on them is that they realize how it is that what they said hurt me. And if they get hurt in the process, it's sort of like a part of me says, well, there's a reason for that. They needed to feel that in order to understand. But that doesn't mean that I still say, oh, well, it's a good thing they were hurt in itself. I don't. So that's hopefully that answered your question.
What about if you feel that you've let someone down?
What about it?
Well, does that, do you have a conscience in that area?
Sure, I guess. I mean, really the only person that I've felt that about, I guess, well, I guess there's two people. I guess my mother and my son are really the only two people that I have felt strongly enough about in that way that I've had like a where I've broken down or something like that over it. That's been the only two people I can think of like that. There have been certainly other things I regret. You know, I had a good friend like third, fourth, beginning of fifth grade that I basically just dumped as a friend for no good reason, and I regret that. I wish I hadn't done that because even though we became friends again later on, it was never quite the same. We were never as close as we were back then, and we could have been. I don't know. You know, for all I know, something would have happened that made that not the case anyway. But I regret that I was the one that made it happen at the time.
So to summarize, it would be like you feel guilt for breaking feelings rather than breaking laws.
Again, I'm not sure I would describe that I describe it as guilt, but yeah, I've never felt any kind of remorse for breaking a law itself. That's never been. Yeah, just because something is a law doesn't mean that it is something that actually serves any kind of useful purpose.
Mm.
So again, if it didn't hurt anybody, then no, I wouldn't feel bad for breaking a law. Um, I would feel I could feel anxiety if I thought I was going to be caught, or if I was like the time I got the speeding in the school zone ticket, which was an accident. I wasn't trying to speed in the school zone. It was circumstances that, but I didn't feel bad about doing that. I felt bad that I did it because of having to pay a fine and all that other stuff.
Okay. Um, uh, do you think you are sensitive?
Yes.
Almost an emo?
Yeah, not as like a culture thing, but yeah. I mean, I've called myself that, and so is my son. I mean, if you use the word emo as being short for emotional, then yes, I'm emotional all the time. I have um, to me, it's like if something is uh, worthy of being considered at all, then it's worthy of being emotional about because otherwise, what's the point?
Right. Okay. Right. How about when you mentioned there about choosing the children to sponsor? So do you think for you identification is a very important thing with you? Like when you identified certain that like the characters in soap operas, the ones that you identified with that you felt were like you, rather than just hot. That identification has always been an important thing. Yeah.
I don't know how to classify whether it's important or not. I mean, it's just a thing.
Well, or in terms of something you react to, something that's like okay, if we talk about you really like the Tina character in One Life to Live,
Uh-huh.
and you identified with her with the ESFP uh,
Yeah.
motivations and sentiments,
Mm-hmm.
and so with yourself, because you said before that there's a lot of artisans in that format.
Yeah.
So do you like find that connection with those types of characters?
Yeah, I mean, if they're well written, I usually do. Yeah, if they're consistent enough that I can sort of kind of form a connection with them, then yeah. I mean, there's a lot of shows that I don't watch and I don't get interested in those particular shows or movies or whatever, uh, because I'm just doing other things. But the ones that I actually do, watch for any kind of period of time, it's usually because there is at least one character I can relate to. Not always. I mean, I enjoyed Seinfeld a lot, and I didn't really relate to any of them very much. Uh, although I think Elaine was probably is an artisan, but I'm not sure she's an ESFP. And even if she was, I didn't like relate to her as, oh, I'm so much like her, so this is why the show is good. It was the show was good because it was funny and they did a good job of turning a lot of absurd situations or making realistic situations into things that were funny for absurd reasons. Basically, I guess. So it's not that I can't enjoy a show without specifically relating to a certain character. I think it enhances a show if I relate to a character, but it's not necessary for me to enjoy it.
Do you think you are good at being
Yes,
appropriate?
whatever it is, yes, I'm great at that. Sorry,
how about being appropriate?
Being appropriate.
Not in the socially conventional sense of manners, but like having a gut instinct for.
Oh, you mean like being aware of my audience kind of thing?
A little bit, and just even with the smaller numbers of people.
Well, I mean, the audience can be small, but yeah, I think I am, yeah, to an extent. I mean, I consider that. Overall, I think I try to be as mass appeal as possible, just in general. Like that doesn't mean I'm always that way. Obviously, if I'm just talking to one person, if I'm like in the car with one or two people, or I'm in a situation where I know that the only ones that can hear me, then there might be certain things I would say that I wouldn't say to a mass audience. But in general, for most of my life, I think even before I was a father, but especially when I was, I sort of looked at it as if there was like a constant camera and microphone on me, like would this be something where I would want this to be broadcast to people? And if it's not, then I have to kind of say, well, is it worth saying? Because it's not that I feel like there's anything inherently wrong with people expressing stuff. Because I don't. I think that's an important thing for people to be able to do that. But I also think that, and I don't walk on eggshells for people like this idea that, oh, well, I got everything I say, I got to make sure it can't possibly irritate someone or offend somebody. Or whatever. No, you can't live life that way because somebody's always going to object to something. There's going to be someone who's offended by anything for whatever reason. But that doesn't mean that you also have to have the opposite attitude, which is I'm just going to bulldoze ahead with whatever, and whoever gets run over, too bad. You can be considerate of other people without censoring yourself to a point where you've like taken away your own self-expression. I think you can express yourself, but still do it in a way that is considerate of other people without, and there are times in which the environment is such that people are insulting each other for like comedy reasons, and that's a different thing for me. That's like something where everybody's like, this is the theme of this, is we're all kind of bashing each other in this way, and there's a reason to it. We're all having fun. There's a difference between that and really having a two-faced attitude, whereas like somebody that you act all polite to in person, but then as soon as that person's not around, you're running to other people and talking all about how you can't stand the person. Like that kind of thing irritates me great. And I can't say 100% I've never done that, but I really don't very often, and I try not to put myself in a position where I'm ever doing that.
So I think one of your strengths as well is that I suppose I'm not really supposed to be listing them like this, but I think one of your strengths is being funny. And do you think that you notice with other funny people that you're better at not knowing where the objective line is of what society says where the line is, but that you feel that you have a line for yourself that you don't cross when being funny?
You've made it long enough that I had to shift positions, or else my leg was going to hurt too much.
Okay.
So that ought to be like maybe that should be the threshold. Is when I have to do that. Then it's time to wrap it up. But I'm sorry. Repeat the question.
It was about with ENTPs, they will go so far in the aim to be funny that they can hurt someone's feelings. Whereas with you, I think you have a sense of where the line is, sort of your own line.
Yeah, well, to me, like no offense, Ben, but did you listen to my last answer? Because I think I've pretty much already said what I do. I try to be as mass appeal as I can in terms of I try not to say stuff that I think is likely to be offensive to people. But that doesn't mean that I'm not offensive to people, because that's naturally going to happen sometimes. Everybody's got different standards and values, and there's going to be people that, my son is fond of saying, like, people are offended by his existence, and I think it is pretty much true. There are going to be people that are just like, my natural way of being is going to be offensive, and there's nothing I can do about that. I'm not going to try to become someone else to please those people. But beyond that, I don't go out of my way to I don't try to hurt people's feelings. And if I make a comment that is kind of a biting type of comment or sarcastic kind of dig at someone, then my feeling is that person can handle what I'm saying. That this is something that's done in humor, and that person knows that it is.
Right.
But I always
So
open that up to, if the person really was bothered by it, then tell me, and I won't repeat that. I'll try not to do that again, because that's
Right.
not my intention. And I told the story on a previous video. I can't remember whether it was recorded or not, but I think it was, when I was talking about what I did to one of my friends when I was, I don't know, 11 or 12 or so, when we were at the mall, and I hit him with my coat, and his sisters thought that was hilarious, so they started laughing. So I kept hitting him with it, because I was pleasing an audience, even though he was getting more and more angry at me for doing it, and telling me, eventually he didn't think we could be friends anymore because I had done that. So that was a case where my intention was not to hurt him, but I did, because in the moment it felt like the thing that I was enjoying doing, because I had an audience that was giving me positive feedback. So that's a case of something where I probably went too far. Well, not probably. I did go too far in doing something that was hurting someone, that I didn't fully grasp how much it was. Like, I was sort of, my mind was sort of clouded by the positive reactions I was getting, were sort of pushing out the negative ones I got from him. And that's sort of actually the downside to having that kind of find the positive in everything attitude, is that sometimes it can make you unaware of hurt that you can cause. And I think that's, when you showed me the uh, the copy, the description, the ESFP description from Please Understand Me Too, and it actually had something in there about that, how, because of that kind of mentality of looking for the positive and kind of not wanting conflict and that stuff, ESFPs can have a tendency to sometimes sort of allow themselves to be seduced by the positive, in terms of, we don't see what the bad things that are happening, because we're too focused on the good things that we see. So that's sort of the dark side of it, is that, it can sometimes cause an involuntary unawareness of things that were probably good to be aware of.
Right. Do you think you have an above average ability with words?
Above average ability with words. I don't know, because I don't know where the average is. So it's hard for me to say. I would say probably not. I don't think I'm probably above average. I think um, I've always liked words, and some things that you can do with them, but I think that's more of an interest than it is like some kind of ability, really.
Well, the way Kersey mentioned that artisans like certain types of words, you see yourself good at that, the way he describes artisans using, what is it, consonant words? Consonant sounds?
Yeah, and I think, and that goes back to kind of what I was talking about earlier, in terms of also trying to appeal to people, is you sort of go towards what sounds appealing, and words can be that, and there's words that just strike me as sounding better than others, and so I tend to gravitate towards those words. But again, that's just to my ear. It may not necessarily be to everybody else's. There's words, obviously, that a lot of people like the sound of that I don't, and vice versa. So,
Right. So we'll aim with Jess big. Besides the generosity, that is entertaining people.
Mm-hmm.
Could you tell us about that, please?
Yeah, I'm terrible at entertaining people. I should just give up and join a convent or a monastery or something. They probably wouldn't have me either, though, because I wouldn't be entertaining to them either.
No.
So, yeah. Sorry, everybody, for boring you and being lame. I mean, I hope that I entertain people. I know people have told me that I have, and I'm happy anytime anyone says that. Literally, like one person tells me that, and I'm happy for a while after that because that's like so much better than somebody telling me I'm smart. Which again, I know that's a thing that a lot of people that appeals to them. To me, it doesn't. Like I take no joy from that whatsoever. I'm not insulted by it, but I don't like saying that I'm smart or knowledgeable or whatever. It doesn't really do anything for me. But saying that I'm entertaining is great. So, and I'm not telling people to say that if they don't mean it either. That's annoying. But you know, but yeah, uh, stuff.
I think you have said at some point that you think you could replace a lot of the chat show hosts on television.
Oh yeah,
Better job.
yeah. But see, I don't know because one of the things is they're tied down somewhat by the format, by what the networks or whatever tell them to do. And so I know that if I had a show like that, I could be unique and I could be more um, entertaining and more original. But I don't know if they would let me be. I think I'm fighting with the network or whoever over those things, which I know some of them have. I know there's stories of Letterman battling with his bosses over certain things, and same thing with some of the others. So I know there's precedent for that, obviously. But yeah, I would take a very different attitude, an approach to that sort of thing, and not have it just be the typical. It seems like they can replace the host, but they keep basically the same format of show, which is obviously what the networks want them to. But yeah, I would try to do something different.
Could you tell the listeners the mustard and mayonnaise anecdote about how you can?
Well, you really like that, don't you?
Yeah, I really do. Yes.
There wasn't much to it. It was just I talked about when I worked at a Subway restaurant inside a mall, and it was the mall food court. So the acoustics were terrible. People had a hard time hearing you when right in front of you. Customers would wouldn't hear you very well. So you just had to say something that sounded close to what they expected you to be saying um, to get the point across. And so that was sort of an opportunity just for little creative moments because I could, um, when it came to time to ask them if they wanted mustard or mayonnaise on the sandwich, I could say flustered or flanaise because it sounded close enough to it that they knew what I meant. I couldn't hear that I said something weird. So it was an opportunity just in sort of the tedium of the day as you go through the day and you're just kind of getting tired of doing the same thing over and over again and saying the same things over and over again that you have to I had to anyway come up with little things like that I could do that would be that could keep it a little bit more fun so I didn't just completely die of boredom. So that was one of the things I did.
And generally, I think you said that you like to put your twist on things.
Mm-hmm.
Right then. Right, I think we've covered a lot of any other strengths you think you have?
No.
No.
I have none. I'm
Right.
terrible.
Right. We're going to go to the next
All right.
hangout, folks, and we're going to do weaknesses.
Yeah, that's much better. I have much more of those.
Right. Okay, here we go. And